Hello, you've recently purchased an Alto Shaam Combi therm oven. A huge investment, and it's a great tool, but to get the most out of the equipment, I'd like to step you through some of the best methods of cooking, operating, cleaning, and even preventative maintenance for this unit. Known mainly for their cook and hold equipment, Alto Shaam has also had Combi therm ovens for well over a decade. You may be asking why Combi or Combi therm as a piece of equipment in your kitchen. First off, we're reducing the amount of equipment that you do need in your kitchen overall, in that I can do some functions in this oven that normally would be handled by just one piece of equipment. Secondly, a Combi therm oven is more efficient, it's more practical, it's programmable, and also at the end of the day, it does result in a higher finished yield than any other piece of equipment in your kitchen. To think about the science of it, a Combi therm oven is combining three pieces: steam, air, and radiant heat. What I can do in that oven is I can put them together at one time, all together, or separately in their own components. Why do I want to have steam in a dry cook environment? Think about a pot of boiling water on the stove. When it's turning from water into steam vapor, that temperature is at about 212 degrees. If I stick my hand into that cloud of steam, I'll get a pretty effective burn very quickly, if not immediately, and I pull my hand out right away. If I now go over to my convection oven in the kitchen, running at 375 or 400 degrees, and I open the door and put my hand in, I have about 10 to 15 seconds where my hand can be in that environment. Any burn I get would be mainly around anything metallic, a rack in the shelf or a pan in the shelf, and it really wouldn't be that effective. So now think if I introduce steam into an environment that's cooking at 350, 375 degrees, I'm increasing my efficiency. My coverage or my evenness of cooking is 100%, and as well, because it's a closed vessel and I'm cooking at a low pressure, 3 to 5 pounds of pressure, I'm actually being more efficient in my cooking in that I can cook faster than I would in a traditional method. Let's get started with the oven. On the outside, I've got the door handle that can turn either to the left or to the right to release the door. To close it, simply just a firm push. On the outside, I also have a USB port that's used for firmware and recipe updating, and also a retractable spray nozzle. If I pull it out to a break point, I can use the spring button on the end to spray water into the cavity to fill up grains or pasta that I'm cooking in here. As well, I can also use it on other equipment within my kitchen. Moving inside the oven, you'll find on the inside there's two releases that will open up the extra panes of glass that are inside the oven. The reason we do that is for cleaning and for care of the oven when maybe I have to clean something in between the panes of glass. I'll make sure that when I close this, I get both of the panes under the latch. Internally, you'll find the internal probe that is user detachable from the oven cavity. I might remove this for safekeeping, or should there be any damage or loss, I could always replace this and install it myself without having to have a service call. Between the oven and the door is a rubber gasket. Similar to your car, if I mix grease and rubber, the rubber will break down and become brittle. So one thing to do for sure when you're cleaning every day is hot soapy water on this gasket all around all four sides before you start the cleaning cycle. As well, at the end of the day, I will leave the door ajar slightly to release the pressure that's on this rubber gasket. This gasket can last up to 4 years, but it's really a matter of your daily preventative maintenance to that. To turn the unit on or off, you may have one of two different types of buttons. This button has an on and an off, or like this button, you might have one button with a light that either goes green or red. To turn this unit on, I'm going to press the on button firmly and let go. The unit will turn on and start up the software process. On the second button, I'm going to press the power button once and release, and I get a green light. Both ovens will go through the same process of startup as far as loading their software and getting the oven ready to cook. To turn this unit off, I'll press and hold the off button until the shutdown screen comes on. The oven will go into a shutdown process, and once it's fully off, the light in the cavity will switch off. To start the calibration process, you may have one of two different types of buttons. This one has an on and an off button. This button has a single button with a light that turns red or green. To start the calibration on this oven, I'll press the on button once firmly, count to 5, and then I'm going to press and hold the off button to another count of 5 and release. On this other oven, I'm going to press and hold the single button until I see the red light, and once I see the red light, I'll remove my finger. The oven will go through its normal startup process, loading the software into the system and getting ready for a screen calibration. Once the oven is ready for calibration, it'll give me this screen that's asking, do I want to calibrate? Yes or no, and giving me those two options. If the calibration is off and I'm unable to say yes or no, I could just wait for 15 seconds and the screen will automatically move in to the next part of the calibration process. Once we're into the calibration process, the oven is going to give me 5 points to touch on the screen to recalibrate the screen and allow me to operate the unit. As you see here on the countdown screen, it's giving me 30 seconds to do that. So down here on the bottom left, you see there's a plus. Here there's another plus. Every time I successfully touch each one, it moves to another corner of the screen. And then finishing right here, number 5 is in the center. Now I have another 5 points to check the screen, and I can just push these boxes to confirm the calibration, and they will turn green if I'm successful. Now the oven goes back into its normal screen mode, and we've calibrated the screen. Onto the home screen, we have two different options for cooking. We're either cooking the oven in a manual mode or in an automatic mode. The manual mode, we call it a professional mode, where you're telling the oven what you'd like it to do. In the second mode, the recipe book is going to be where you'll find all of your automatic recipes that will work by time, temperature, and probe, altering during that process the fan and the humidity to get us the product that we're after. On this screen, you'll also see a few different modifiers on the very bottom row. On this button, you'll see this is a screen saver. It turns off the light in the cavity and turns off the screen. This would be for an operator that has the oven either close to a dining room or in an environment that's maybe a little bit light sensitive. As you saw, I pressed and held it. To bring the screen back up, I'll press and hold the screen. Moving along the bottom row, you'll see a button for the wash cycle, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. Next to the wash cycle is an I button. The I button is for information. As I press and hold that button, it's going to put a text label on every button that's on the screen to help me understand what each button is doing. The button beside that, the Toolbox, now moves me into my user options. I either have the download button, I have the settings button, or there's also a service button. Also in this screen, you'll notice I have my software versions, and as well the current time and date on the system, and also our service desk should you need to call anyone for help. Now let's move into a manual mode or professional cooking in the Combi Therm oven. I'm going to hit my manual button. This is now going to give me my full set of controls within the oven. The best thing to do at this point is to think of it as a book. I'm going to move top to bottom, left to right. So starting at the very top, I have all the modes available to me. Steam, Combi, convection, and as well, plated retherm. Moving down, each item after I've picked my mode allows me to select a temperature. If I touch the black numbers, it opens up a window that shows me what temperatures are available in that mode. I can put in my temperature I select, and I'll press the green button to confirm that selection. After the cook temperature, I can enter in either time or internal probe as a setting for the oven. In the time box, I have hours, minutes, and seconds. As an example, here's 5.5 hours and 5 seconds. Or in the bottom of this box, you see this is, I call it my infinity button. This button is telling the oven to run until we tell it to stop. So this might be used in a situation where you're getting ready for service, moving through your mise en place, and you need the oven to run continuously. Alternatively, in the Pro Box now, I can set what my finished temperature is going to be of that product. So when I put in 180, the oven won't stop cooking until it reaches that 180 degrees, no matter how long that takes. If at any time during the cook process or the programming process, I press these icons on the side, you see my temperature turns green. That is giving me the current reading right now of that criteria. So in this case, the oven right now is reading 98 degrees. The probe is reading 92 degrees. And if I had a time cycle running, it would actually tell me the start of the time as far as how much time I was cooking by. Once I put in those 3 basic criterias, I can now press the green button to start the oven. The light in the door handle will turn on and go blue to let me know that the oven is operating. The power measurement bar is showing us how much power we're drawing through the unit. And as well, that green button is turned red. 3 great ways of knowing if your oven is operating and to what level of operation it's going. Looking at the other buttons on the bottom half of the screen now, I have a few modifiers that will help me to operate the oven in a few different methods. First off would be my preheat. This is the thermometer with a red up arrow. This is asking me for what temperature I want to preheat the oven to. Just like cooking at home, you preheat the oven and put your cookies in and start your timer, versus putting your cookies in, starting the oven, and starting your timer. So when I use this mode, it uses more energy and has a higher fan speed in the cavity, not meant to have food in the oven at that time. As you see here, I've set the oven at 350 in black, and as from before, if I'm in green, this is telling me my current temperature. This screen will run a preheat until 350 degrees, and then the oven will alarm and blink on the door handle to let me know that I've achieved that temperature. The opposite to that preheat button will be the cool down. So this is a thermometer now with a blue arrow down. This would be maybe if I was cooking at 350, 375 degrees a protein, and now maybe I want to do something a little more delicate or some baked goods at 300, and I need to drop that temperature quickly. If I hit the cool down button and put in the temperature I want to get to, the oven will tell me to open the door, and it reverses the fans and will cool down the oven. The speed of that all depends on how far the oven door is open. I could open it a small little bit, or if I needed to go quickly, I could open it all the way. Working through the bottom half of the oven now, I have a few other buttons that will help me to operate the oven to my specifications. The first button here is a lightning bolt. This is the power mode on the oven. If I needed to slow down the fan or reduce the energy consumption, I can move this oven down into a reduced power mode. The button here now switches to a lightning bolt with a green down arrow to show me that I will be using less energy, but as well, maybe I'll be doing something delicate where I need to lower the fan speed. If I press the fan button here, this now gives me all 5 modes of fan. 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100% fan. Our fans are very efficient, but also very fast. Your traditional convection oven hovers right around the 60% zone here. So if you're used to cooking with that kind of a fan, 60 is where you'd like to go. Moving into the 80 and the 100% fan, you'll find that you get a darker, richer color, quicker, so sometimes it's not the best for delicate product. Moving into a 20 or a 40% fan would be again for my more delicate product, such as baked goods, anything that's on silicone paper, or drying herbs, dehydrating, making apple chips, that kind of thing. Moving next to the fan button is the humidity button. This is a cloud with a raindrop in it. This is set at 100% every time you turn on the oven, and this is the oven now telling us it's going to keep 100% of moisture that's coming off of your product within the oven cavity. I can lower that by pushing the buttons here on the side, or I can press the down button here as well to go to a lower percentage of humidity. As I move down from 100% to 0, I will increase my crispiness and texture, and as well I will introduce browning into the oven by removing moisture. So an example of where I'd want this is on a fried product, maybe a chicken finger or a fish finger. Maybe I had Peking duck in the oven. Maybe I had a tray full of roasted red peppers where I was trying to remove moisture. increase texture, and increase color. So the further I move down this, the lower I go, the darker my product will become. Right next to the humidity button is a dehydrate mode. If I press this, it's a preset that sets the oven into a mode 140 degrees with the infinity time on, and it also opens up that humidity valve to be 0% within the cavity. This is a great program for overnight drying. Just below the dehydrate button, you'll find the multi-shelf timer. This is now a different way of looking at operating your Combi. Instead of running one program that's for one product and the oven stops, the oven now runs continuously. So it'll be in the mode I've requested. This is 140 degrees convection. But now I have this multiple shelf timer. I can change the times based on the items I have in the oven. That's 3 minutes. This one is going to be 45 seconds. This one's going to be 10 seconds. As I start the timers, it's completely unrelated to what else is happening in the oven, in that when my timer expires, the oven continues to run. So as we'll see here, this 10-second one runs through and comes up. The oven alarms, but the oven is actually still running. Benefits here, if I have multiple items in the kitchen at multiple time that can all work at the same temperature, I can run them in the oven this way and use multiple timers. The other benefit too is if I press the number, I can put on a text of what is in the oven, or also the name of the person whose timer it is. So as I have, this is now Vern's timer. If I press the letters or the numbers, it will alternate between how much time is left, or whose timer it is, or what timer it is. This is a great option for a kitchen that's busy and has multiple products on the go at any given time. This is only stoppable though if I go back to the main programming screen and I press the stop button. Another option on the lower part of the screen would be delta T. The delta meaning change, the T being temperature. If I press this button, it now brings up a screen that gives me the option of 15 degrees to 200 degrees. What this setting is following the probe that you put into a protein. This is telling us what the difference between the temperature and the protein is to the temperature of the oven. So it's a very, very slow process of cooking your product, in that we can overnight cook a product with this change in temperature. Normally, at myself, I run at 125 degrees difference. And what this is going to do is give us the option for your final temperature. So if I was going to cook prime rib, I'd probably be at 135 degrees. My delta T, you see the lights lit up green here, is going to be 125 degree difference over the product. This will give us about a 10-hour cook on a product, so a slow cook overnight, to a finished cooking of 135 degrees. Let's move into the second method of working with the oven. This is going to be the recipe or program part of the oven. Press the recipe book. It's going to take me now into this screen. That's going to have all my recipes in here. Your oven will come preloaded with recipes from the factory, and depending on your operation, you may have some in here, or you may want to write them, and we can talk about that later. Going through the recipe screen, I have a few different ways of navigating. On the bottom here, you see I'm on page 3, and I can use the left or the right arrow keys to navigate through those recipes. I can also press this magnifying glass on the bottom and bring up a keypad where I can look for a recipe based on a few letters of whatever word is in the recipe itself. Once I've found the recipe I want, one touch starts the program and moves into a preheat if required on the oven. You see here we're going to 400 degrees in this program to start it. Right now the oven's at 149 degrees. Once I'm into the program, the oven will go into its own preset settings that have been determined by the operator to be the most opportune way of operating the oven. As you see in here, I cannot operate the oven or push any buttons in this mode to change or affect the cook. The only thing I can do is stop the program and either start again or go back into the manual mode. While I'm in the recipe screen, I have a few different ways of viewing these recipes as well. If I press the sort button up here at the top, it gives me the option of either alphabetical or historically. Historically will show me the last recipe inserted at the very top of the list. Favorites now opens up a folder of my favorites, and it gives me the opportunity to take a recipe database of hundreds of recipes and only choose maybe the 20 that I want to see more frequently or that I use most often. In the folders menu, I can have the opportunity to view or group my recipes by person, by day part, by menu, or even by seasons. I can do any combination that I want there to make my folders easier and quicker to access. While I'm working with a recipe mode, and if I wanted to change a recipe, maybe it's not working for me, maybe it's not enough time, maybe it's too much time, I can change that in any way that I want. To start with that, I'm in the recipe screen. I press the button on the bottom. This is a recipe book with a gear wheel on it, and the screen will go red. This is now letting me know that I'm in the editing option. We can tell the oven what you want to do. I either want to edit the recipe, delete it, I will make it a favorite, I could lock out any changes to it, or I could put it into a folder. In this case, I'm going to choose edit, and whatever I push will bring up that recipe. Now, as I'm operating through the recipe, it'll show me what step I'm in or what page of your recipe I'm on, and I can make any changes in here I wanted. Maybe I wanted to change this to 349 instead of 350. That's the only change I wanted. I could just press the save button, but maybe I wanted to make a change on another step. I'd like to change this to 349 degrees as well. Now I'm done. I'll press the save button, and it brings up a window that lets me change the name on the item. It lets me change the photograph associated with the item. It lets me make it a favorite by pushing that button, and it also lets me lock out that recipe altogether. Once I'm finished all the changes I want to do in here, I'm going to press the save button, and I'm right back to normal. The screen is blue, and I'm no longer editing. Let's write a recipe for the oven. On the home screen, I'll choose the manual or professional cook mode, and on the very bottom here is going to be a recipe book with a pencil. When I push that button, this now puts me into a fully programmed screen. This number here is really important in this process in that it's showing me which step I'm on in this recipe. Every single recipe you'd like to start with a preheat. This will ensure that the oven's at the right temperature every single time you start your process. In my preheats, when I program the oven, I always go 25 degrees hotter than what temperature I want to work at, and that's because when I open the door, there is a loss in temperature, and the doors open usually for 25 to 30 seconds. I put in the preheat. I'm not changing any other settings. On this button here is a pencil with an arrow to the right. I'll press this, and it's now moved me to step 2. As we discussed previously, I treat this screen top to bottom, left to right. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell the oven what mode I want to be in. In this program, I'm now in convection mode. I'll go 350, and I'm going to go by probe of 160 degrees. As well, while I'm in here, I'd like to slow down my fan a little bit, so I'll move it to 60%. The next step now I'll move to is my third step of 3, so this would be my final step. In here, maybe I'm changing my mode to a different mode, steam or combi, and working differently in time or temperature. Everything I put in this setting will save into the program and will remain a component of the system. Once I've finished programming whatever I'd like to put in, I can press the save button. I can now give it a recipe name. I can also choose a photo on this button. If I press this button, I also make a favorite. Once I've finished all this information, I press the green button, and it is now saved into my recipe folder. Let's step through and also delete a recipe that maybe I don't want. I'm in my recipe screen. I press the bottom edit button and the screen will go red. I'll choose the garbage can because I'm going to delete, and I press the recipe that I don't want. The oven will ask me, do I want to delete, yes or no? And I'm going to say yes to delete it, and that recipe is gone. Let's select a few recipes to put into a folder. I'll go into the recipe button, I'll choose the edit button, and at the top here I'll select the favorites, and as I press buttons on the items that I want or I don't want, you'll notice that the star removes or is added to that button. That's how we add favorites to the recipe screen. Let's choose a few recipes to put into a folder now. I'll go into the recipe mode, I'll press the edit button on the bottom of the screen, and now I'll choose the folder button. I can choose which folder I'd like to put product into, and as I touch the recipe, you'll notice that a folder appears on the bottom left-hand corner of the picture. That's letting me know that that recipe is put into that folder. When I'm done, I'll hit back, and I'm back to the normal screen. That's how you add a recipe to a folder. Now let's have a look at the Toolbox screen. I'll press the Toolbox button, and it gives me these three options: the download, the user settings, or the service settings buttons. Pressing the download button will move me into this screen where a lot of the options are grayed out. As soon as I put a USB into the USB drive, those options will become clear and I'll be able to select them. The oven takes about 5 seconds to read that USB drive, and then you'll see the icons will all come to life. These top icons, the top three, are based on the recipes within the oven. So if I wanted to move the recipes from my USB onto the oven and overwrite all recipes on the oven, I could press the top button. If I wanted to do the reverse, if I wanted to take recipes from the oven and save them to the USB, I would use the second button. If I wanted to add a recipe, so now maybe on my USB there's 2 or 3 recipes that I like or that I want to add to the oven, I would put the disk in and I would press this plus button, and that's going to save just those recipes to my existing recipes without overwriting anything. HACCP is going to be my data logging system, hazards and critical control points. When I press this button, it's going to give me a download to the USB of an Excel file that has every single mode the oven's been operated on, and as well within that mode, what are the readings? What are the oven temperatures? What's the probe set at? Is the door open or closed? And also what program is the system running? The next button down is the oven with an arrow around it, and that's our firmware update. If I had a firmware file saved to the USB, whether I got that from the Alto Shaam website or if I had it from a corporate USB, I could put it into the USB drive and press this update button. Underneath it as well, we have a few other options. This is a counter to tell me how many operations my system's been through. And the final button as well is the screen calibration record. It tells us how often the screen's been calibrated and the details about that. And that's really the options I can have within the USB screen. While I'm in the Toolbox, it gives me the options here to find out what firmwares I'm currently running in this oven. This oven is running right now version 2.11. It shows me the date and the time and the system of the oven, and as well gives me a 1-800 number for service should I need to call anyone for help. Moving down into the user options, we've got a few different settings that can be changed by the user at any time in operation. This is a Fahrenheit or Celsius button, depending on what degree of temperature I wanted to use in the oven. This is a user setting or factory setting button, and this is for the defaults. So every time I go to my cook screen, do I want it to automatically default to 350 degrees? Or maybe I never use that temperature. This button will then let me use what the last temperature I used in that mode. The button below that controls the light that's in the door handle. Maybe I was in a light-sensitive environment or a dining room and I needed to turn off this light, I could do that through this button here. Moving down to this button now, it's giving me the option of do I want a text label on my recipe or do I just want a photograph? The button below it is locking recipes or unlocking them. If I were to lock them, it would ask me to give a password to lock the recipes in the unit, and the recipes wouldn't be able to be changed. Underneath that is now my sounds. This is twofold. First of all, my volume, and second of all, my different types of alarm in the oven. A great option, should you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 ovens, all stacked in the same, I can set different tones to different ovens so that I know which oven is alarming. The button underneath the sound button is for screen brightness. This lets me brighten the screen or dim it should I need to for any environment. If I use the right arrow here at the bottom of the screen, it moves me to a second screen of options. This is now my language options, so I can change this to any international language I wanted. Underneath that is my date and my time. I could change it for daylight savings or also for the time of year. And then underneath that as well, a few different options. First off is my probe calibration, if I need to recalibrate my probe. Underneath the probe calibration button is also a timer button for my gasket, my cleaning. If I had a water filter, if I had a ventilation system hooked up to this oven, I could reset all those through this screen. All it would be is press the screen itself. I could change what the timeline is for that, and as well I could reset that time by pressing the reset button. And that's your toolbox in a nutshell. Let's talk about calibrating the probe within your Combi oven. You should really never have to do this, but if you're finding that the probe is off, we can always put it in an ice bath and check the temperature that way. So what I'll do is I'll take an insert of ice, and then using the spray nozzle on the oven, I'm going to put in just a bit of water. I really want more ice than water to ensure that it's a cold environment. I'll put this in here to the oven, and I'm going to put the probe straight deep into the center of that ice. Moving to the touch screen, I'll go into the toolbox. I'm going to hit the gear, and on the second page there's a button here that has the probe and a plus sign over the probe. Pressing that now is going to show me what the probe is reading and if I need to change that reading at all whatsoever. We see here that the probe's coming down to 34. And should I need to change that calibration at all, I could plus or minus this setting to reach 32 degrees. Right now this probe is calibrated perfectly, and I can go back to cooking. And that's how you calibrate the probe on your Alto Shaam CTP oven. If your Alto Shaam Combi oven has a smoker as an option, there's a couple critical steps to getting through that process to ensure that we have a really nice amount of smoke in the oven, but as well, a very balanced flavor. What I'm going to do here is take my smoking chips and I'm going to cover them in water just from the spray nozzle. This is going to let me soak the product for about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll just leave them here while we do that. Now that the chips have soaked for 10 minutes, I'm going to drain the water off and place them into the smoker box, ensuring that the chips are balanced evenly over the whole entire smoking box. Taking the smoking box, I'm going to ensure that the screws at the back of the oven fit into the 2 circles, and as well the smoking element will fit into the bottom of this smoking box. Once I'm firmly in, the box will fit tightly into that smoking element and it won't be able to move around. There's 2 ways in which we can operate the smoking system within this oven. On the far left-hand side of your options screen here now you see there's 2 buttons with a smoke cloud in them. The first one has a snowflake and the bottom one has a fire. Cold smoke on the top, hot smoke on the bottom. Using the hot or the cold smoking system in the oven, I can perform 2 different tasks. The hot smoking button would be used during a cook process. As I touch the button, you see it turns green. This now indicates that the element within the oven is on, and I can put in my normal cook settings. the temperature I wanted to cook at, and as well how I wanted to cook. Maybe I'm going to cook by probe temperature at this. During this whole entire process, the smoker box will be on when the light is lit green. As a second option, I could choose the cold smoking button. And what the cold smoking button does is it will turn the oven off. So we're only running the smoker box completely by itself and not generating any heat in the oven. In this setup now, the oven is turned off for heat. I'm running that element for 15 minutes, and as you see here, that bottom icon is on again. The cold smoker box gives us the opportunity to cold smoke product that doesn't require any heat. As an example, nuts, chocolates, cheeses, avocados. I can even smoke coffee beans in here. Let's have a look at how to clean your Combi Therm oven. I'm going to move into the inside here and just lift up this grate. It's a spring-mounted grate that's here to catch debris and food product from falling down the drain. I'll put that to the side right now, and taking my Combi Therm tablets, I'll rip them open, and wearing gloves, I'll take the tablet out and put it right down the drain. Very important not to put the tablet onto the surface of the oven for the cleaning process, as there actually won't be enough water to dissolve the tablet. We want to ensure that we feed that down into the drain. Moving over to the touch screen now, I select the wash button, and it gives me the 5 levels of cleaning. You'll notice on each level, it'll show us how many tablets are required and how much time the cycle will take. Once we start the cleaning cycle, the oven does lock us out, so you have to fulfill the full cleaning process to ensure that the oven is ready to go before we put food product in it. The further I go down, the more tablets and the more time I add, the cleaner the oven will become. So if you're finding on some modes that the oven isn't fully clean the next day, just try another level up and a little more time, and the oven will get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner every time we do it. To the end here, we have 6 tablets in 3.5 hours, which is a very, very heavy clean cycle for a heavily soiled oven. Depending on your location, you may find that you have some hard water deposits that do result in a white, chalky finish in the oven after cleaning. If you're visually seeing these deposits inside your oven, this step is critical. It's not just cosmetic, it's also mechanical, as this buildup will slow down and reduce the life expectancy of the oven. An effective way to combat these calcium and magnesium deposits would be to add a 1 cup solution of white vinegar straight into the oven and run just the rinse cycle without any tablets. Once I press the green check, the cleaning process will start, and I'm locked out of that system until the oven is clean. And that's how you clean your Combi Pro oven.